As one of the strong accusations against those who hold to a historical Genesis paradigm is that it's not based upon science. But that can't be true. Doesn't this paradigm also look at the reality of the physical evidence?
Oh, of course it does. The problem with that objection, which I'm familiar with, is it's smuggling into the word science an assumption. And when someone says, well, you're not looking at it scientifically, what they're presupposing or smuggling in is you're only allowed to use physical processes. But you couldn't live a single day thinking that way. Every time you get a text on your phone, you know, someone leaves a note in your car door when they bump your car in a supermarket parking lot. Normal human life depends on our ability to detect the action of intelligence. And we don't collapse intelligence into strictly physics. So if a scientist tells me I'm not allowed to use intelligent design to understand or explain the world, I ask him, how do you get through your day? Right? Because you're doing it all the time, very reliably. Science in its deep sense, its original usage in Latin meant knowledge. We know that Stonehenge was constructed by an intelligence. That conclusion will be true when our current theories of physics are long gone. So these inferences to intelligence are very robust, they're strong, and they're fully rational. So I think that the objection that you mentioned is really misdirected, and it's question-begging.
Yeah. Well, Paul, just as we're standing here in this computer history museum, no one would say that all of this amazing technology just simply arose as a result of physical processes. We wouldn't do that.
Right.
We know that an intelligent being, we saw the pictures of all of those amazing people who each added their own intelligence as a part of this process, and yet what we're dealing with is a paradigm that is not willing to accept that.
It's a funny thing about the use of intelligence in explanation. It would be profoundly irrational to say that these devices self-assembled. In fact, no one would say that because it's simply not true. But when we come to things like the origin of life, the origin of the first cell, the origin of humankind, there, the agent in question, the intelligence in question, wouldn't be a member of our species, Homo sapiens. So suddenly the temperature in the room goes way up because the implications for saying the first cell was caused by a mind suddenly involve things that look a lot like theology. And it becomes a much more difficult question for people to evaluate objectively, which is why these questions of origins, as I said a moment ago, aren't really simply scientific questions. They spill over at every point into theology, into philosophy, into these deep questions of who am I, why am I here, where am I going? So I think in many cases for scientists, they function with a split personality. They would say, yeah, a mini computer had to have a designer. I ask, how about a eukaryotic cell? Vastly more sophisticated in its engineering, if you will, than any of the devices we've looked at. Now, that hypothesis of design that was rational for the mini computer suddenly becomes problematic, not because of the evidence, but because of what it entails, what it implies about the universe.
It seems strange, of course, for those of us who hold to the Genesis paradigm, to see that people would point back to Babbage or to Seymour Cray, to those people that we know have the intelligence behind all of this. But it seems like there's the barrier when all of a sudden that begins to be God.
Yeah. You know, what's so funny to me is the same features in these systems, these computers that we say are diagnostic of an intelligent cause, such as integrated functionality, the role of information, and so forth. Those same features are present in a single bacterial cell, but at a much more sophisticated level. So I see a disconnect between evidence and inference, going from evidence to cause, that really can't be explained as a question of science. What's happening is at some point along that pathway, there's a bypass or there's an off-ramp. and the rational chain that should lead you to a designer takes you off in a different direction.
It seems that one paradigm is drawing on a history that was given to us,
Yes.
and another paradigm is constructing that history. Is that how you see that?
Well, it's constructing that history under a set of constraints. The history can only appeal to physical processes. So, if in reality a designer or creator did act discretely in space and time, they can't detect that because they've ruled out that possibility from the start. If you look at a puzzle and decide that certain answers are unacceptable to you, it really doesn't matter what the evidence is. You're never going to discover those answers. So if you begin doing your history with an assumption, I'm only allowed to use this restricted set of strictly physical causes, you will be unable to discover the true history if the true history involved an intelligence.
Well, Paul, the reason this becomes serious is that we're not talking about a history of just boiling water at a certain temperature.
Right.
We're talking about a history that deals with the origin of the universe. It deals with the origin of life, the origin of humanity, the origin of sin and why there's evil in the world, the origin of the geological formations that we have around us, the origin of language. I mean, this is history that is not minor.
Yeah.
This is dealing with major, major elements of humanity and where we are.
Yeah, you're talking about the origin of literally everything. And I think if we zoom out from that and say, well, what really is the difference between these two paradigms? It isn't a question of science on the one hand versus religion on the other, because both of them are scientific in the sense of looking at a common body of data. Really, at the deepest level, the difference is two competing views of history. What is the true history of our cosmos? And in that light, I think it makes a lot more sense to look at them as paradigms that draw on different accounts of history with different implications.